you're watching Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone, and over the weekend I finally got around to watching the movie Get Out, or as I like to call it, Get Out to the Chopper! Yeah, that's right, I did just attempt a pretty lame dad joke to get this video started. Come closer, me old son. Let me let you in on a little secret. If you've come here looking for jokes, you are going to be sorely disappointed, because that, my friends, was about as funny as this guy gets. Seriously though, Get Out, the film by Jordan Peele of Key and Peele fame, is a movie that I would describe as overrated. This is a film that had a lot of hype, and if you're like me, you will have read, heard, watched, you will have seen the reviews of this film that really hype this film up and talk about how important this movie is and how good this film is, and basically, you must go and watch this film. You know the kind of reviews I'm talking about. How does one describe Get Out? Well, I don't know if one can, because I don't think there are enough words in the English language to describe just how great and important this movie is. Not only is it a profound treatise about life in Trump's America, but it also is a truly excellent film. One of the greatest examples of horror filmmaking that you will ever see. In fact, one of the greatest films that's ever been made in this era, or any era since we started making films. It really truly is great. Something very special. Not so much. Like I said, this film is overrated. The execution is fairly solid, but that's what makes it, I think, so frustrating, because when you watch a terrible film, and you go, okay, that was a bad film. They really missed the mark there. But a film like this that comes so close is, I think, extra frustrating, because if there were one or two things that were just tidied up about this movie, it really would be worthy of all the hype. But unfortunately, it's not. It has some key issues that let the film down. Let me just stream of consciousness this video. And by the way, there's going to be spoilers. So if you haven't already seen the film and you don't want any spoilers at all, go away, watch the movie, and then come back and watch this afterwards. So where to start? Daniel Kaluuya, who is the lead actor, excellent. One of the best things about this film. That was an excellent and very inspired casting decision. He is a good actor, and more importantly, he has a presence and he has a tone about him as a person which makes him very likable, and that's important. You've got a protagonist in a story like this, you need the audience to really get on board with that character, and I think we do that. He's likable, he's affable, he's the kind of character that you find yourself really rooting for, and you want him to overcome the odds, and that's good. So that was an excellent casting choice. His offsider, his co-star, Alison Williams, the white girlfriend, not so much. Now, I don't know whether, we can blame all of this on her, because to be fair, some of it's about the dialogue, and probably there's some directing choices in here too. But one thing I really noticed was it felt like the chemistry between the two of them was lacking. And there's a problem there, because that gives the game away far too early. If there's not a proper, authentic chemistry between these two characters, who are supposed to have a very serious and loving relationship, then already your wheels are starting to turn in your head, and you're starting to get suspicious about what's really going on here. And unfortunately, that's what it's like. And there are other ways in which she delivers certain lines too, which they just give the game away too early. And again, part of that is what's been written for her. So when she has that conversation, for example, with her mother when they arrive at the house, this is that, we do that thing every year, and she sort of acts surprised, like the big thing they do every weekend, the big family party where they inhabit the body of another black person. She didn't know that was this weekend, but she would have known, because she would have had a conversation prior to that on the phone with her parents, almost certainly. And so at that point, the game is sort of given away. And so when the big reveal happens that she's in on it, we're not shocked. That really should have been a moment where we were like, oh, no, she's in on it too. Oh, how could this be? I never saw that coming. But instead what happened was, that moment happens and you're like, yeah, well, of course we knew that, because she's been telegraphing this moment for quite some time now. Now, Catherine Keener, the actress who played the mother, she was another excellent casting choice. She had that whole baby boomer progressive elite vibe down pat. You really found yourself believing that this woman was like an aging hippie who had discovered political power. And her presence on screen was just, it had that appropriate sort of menace about it. And also you got that sense of her being like a lefty hippie type character, and that's really what she was supposed to be. And she's really perfect for what this film was supposed to be, which is a horror. She gives off a sense of menace, a sense of mystery that makes you question who she really is. She was good, and the way she played that character and the presence she brought to the role was excellent. Bradley Whitford, on the other hand, who's the guy who plays the husband and the father, not so much. He was another odd choice. He's a guy whose presence is just too comedic, too light, and he lacked that sort of serious fatherly presence, the kind of vibe that someone like Anthony Hopkins would give you. Now, I don't know if they were ever going to get someone like Anthony Hopkins for a film like this, but Bradley Whitford is the guy that probably a lot of people know from The West Wing. He's the guy that Nana loves because he's the guy that delivers those clever little witticisms. He's got that comedic turn about him. He didn't feel like the right character, you didn't believe him, and he didn't feel appropriate in a horror film like this. He just didn't have that sense of menace, and he didn't have what he should have had earlier on, that fatherly presence that he should have given off in a big way, where you find yourself going, yeah, this guy really cares about his daughter, and he's a white guy who really loves social progressive issues and is a really caring kind of guy. He just didn't feel that way. Caleb Landry Jones, the actor who played the son, that was odd. Now, again, part of this is the directing and the script writing, but the way he chose to play that character, basically you're sitting there watching this guy at that opening dinner scene, and that dinner scene was another example of where they just give the game away far too early. Really what you have in this type of story, or what you should have had in this type of story, is basically a very clever facade. The family puts up a facade that looks very, very real, but there's these odd little cracks that appear in the facade here or there. These little warning indicators, but they're not big enough to make you have a big red siren blaring in your head. Danger, get away from these people, these are bad people. But that's how that scene was, and particularly Caleb Landry Jones, how he conducted himself, that's how that whole thing was portrayed. Instead, what you should have had, as I said, was this facade of respectability and concern and care, and then they just sort of let the facade slip every now and then. They say or do the odd little thing that has you going, what? Come again? What did you say? What, you enjoy reading Mein Kampf on your holidays? You know, that kind of thing. And they didn't. It was just sort of odd. In fact, the whole family felt like caricatures. They really did feel like they were more from a comedy skit than a serious horror film. And that kind of makes sense, because writing comedy skits is what Jordan Peele does best. And so it's not surprising that the family didn't have that vibe that I think it really needed to have. Stephen Root, who had a minor part in this, he's the blind artist. He was a good acting choice, I think, or a good casting choice. He's a guy who always acts well in whatever he's in. He's a pretty solid sort of journeyman actor. And I think he was good in this part too. There was something that he brought to the role that was good. But unfortunately, around some of the good casting choices, there were some casting choices that weren't so good, and I think it really let the film down. And as I said, things just felt more like a caricature than the serious sort of menacing tone that they should have had, or the serious caring tone they should have had, which makes the twist all the more surprising when it actually happens. Now, this film is an interesting metaphor. As far as I can tell and read it, it seems to me that this film is a metaphor for white progressives and their insidious racism. So the kind of white progressive that'll say to you, I am not racist and I really care about black people and their issues, but really, at the end of the day, they don't really care about black people. They only see them as objects for their own use. And that's really what this film is about. This white progressive family that sees black people and uses black people as objects for their own purposes, for their own ends. And now, they're not out and out racist. They're not like the KKK, because if they were, they would have nothing to do with transplanting themselves into the bodies of black people. A racist person, an out and out racist, who's KKK type racist, would have nothing to do with that. But instead, they're the other type of insidious racism and the dishonesty that goes along with it, of that political progressive who claims to be all about black issues and talks the talk, but really the only reason they do that is because they want black people to vote for them and to support their causes. And so as a metaphor, it is interesting. And the setup in the first part of the film is fairly good. If you set aside the problems, as I said, with some of the things which give the twist away too early, the setup itself is fairly good. the second part of the film, the final act, that's where things I think just fall apart and the film really fails to deliver. For me, Get Out feels like a concept that never got fully fleshed out. This is like a story concept which never got taken to its proper full potential. It just sort of got left more at the concept stage than at the complete story stage. And that kind of makes sense, because when you think about Jordan Peele, what does he do? He comes up with sketch concepts for a comedy sketch show, and then those concepts, it's the concept where the joke lies really in that context, and it's kind of different to writing stories. And so in this, you have this concept, but it never really gets fully fleshed out, and there's things about it that are missing. And one thing that's really frustrating about this film is the tone. The tone is very messy. And this is down to obviously acting's a part of this, but also directing and writing choices. A great example of this, I think, is the character Rod. Now, Rod is a best friend, and Rod is a comedic character. Now, it's okay to have a character like that, I think, at the start of the film, but once you've actually got into the serious suspense, it's not good to then shift back into comedy mode. And that's exactly what happens. And you have Rod doing things that look like they could have come straight out of a Key and Peele comedy sketch, and they completely shift the tone of the film right away from where it's supposed to be, which is the sense of dread and suspense and terror that should be overwhelming you. Instead, we have this scene where he's doing, this comedy around the phone call that he makes to the girlfriend, and then that comedic scene where he goes to the police and tries to explain the situation to them. That felt like a Key and Peele sketch, that scene where the police officer goes and gets her fellow police officers and gets them to repeat the story, and they all laugh at him. And I think what's really missing here, and this is one of the big things that really let this film down, is that sense of dread and also isolation. And this is down to really the directing, I think. The location itself, where these events took place, it needed to be more of a character in this film. It needed to have more of a presence. Think about something like The Shining, and that whole hotel and the location of that hotel, it's like another character. That sense of isolation adds to the dread, and in the back of your mind, you know, because they're so isolated, when the bad things start happening, it ramps up the tension and the terror, because they can't just run down the road and make a phone call, or they can't just run off to the nearest house and get help, or to a local police station. You didn't feel that sense of isolation. You didn't feel that sense of dread and terror. The atmosphere is wrong in this film. It just doesn't work. It was more comedy than it was atmospheric horror, and that's what it really needed to be. If you want to see a better execution of the same concept, because this is not new, by the way, it's been done before. If you want to see a better execution of this, watch the film The Skeleton Key with Kate Hudson and Peter Sarsgaard. That is a much better example of this exact same concept, the concept of body snatching, taking other people's bodies so you can inhabit them. And what makes that film better is that sense of dread and terror that you get. It is, the atmosphere is prescient, it's present, it overwhelms you, and that's what makes the film frightening and memorable. And for you as an audience, that's what this film, Get Out, really should have been like. It should have been one of those atmospheric dread, terror, isolation type events. But it just wasn't. And I think one of the big problems for me here is that Jordan Peele, who wrote the film, should have actually got himself a director, and he, instead of directing it himself, he should have got an established horror director who's done this sort of thing before and has done this atmospheric isolation dread type horror, and got that director to direct the film for him, because I think the outcome would have been a lot better. As I said, this film is not unwatchable. It's a pretty solid sort of film, but those issues that let it down in such a way that you realize this film could have been so much better. It is ultimately, it's overhyped. It's an overrated film. As per usual, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, so please let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please consider financially supporting the channel. The links to do that are found in the video description below. I'll see you next time on Left Foot Media. What? Left Foot Media? I thought this was for CNN, not that disgusting little wretch. He smells like Tucker Carlson and Walmart. Why would I want to have anything to do with him? He disgusts me. So do you. Get out of my sight. Leave. Leave now, all of you. Go. Do yourself a favour. Watch The Last Jedi, would you? Then you'll discover what good filmmaking is about. Now get out of my sight. Go. Just go.